A scream in the dark, a hand reaching for control. For one terrifying second, the killer believes it's over. But then the victim fights back, the tables turn, and the predator realizes, this time, they chose wrong. For some of the world's most notorious killers, it wasn't careful planning or police work that exposed them. It was a victim who refused to give in, changing the story in ways no one expected. And it all begins with a man who thought an entire city was too afraid to touch him, until the day the crowd decided otherwise. Richard Ramirez, Los Angeles, August 31st, 1985. The summer heat presses down on the city, thick and merciless. A Greyhound bus hisses to a stop, and among the passengers stepping off is a tall, gaunt man with sunken eyes and long, dark hair. Richard Ramirez, the man the press has named the Night Stalker. For months, he has roamed these streets like a phantom, breaking into homes, killing, torturing, leaving behind scenes so brutal they paralyzed entire neighborhoods with fear. His face has been broadcast on every television, printed in every paper, burned into the mind of an entire city. But Ramirez doesn't seem to notice. He walks into a convenience store, buys a drink, tries to blend into the crowd. To him, it's just another afternoon. To everyone else, it's the moment they've been waiting for. At first, it's just a look. One man staring too long, then a murmur, then another. A woman stiffens, points, and whispers to her neighbor. Recognition spreads like wildfire. Suddenly, silence becomes stares, and stares become words. That's him. Ramirez feels it, the eyes following him, the tension thickening in the air. He bolts out of the store, heart pounding, legs pumping. But this is not the frightened silence of midnight suburbs. This is broad daylight, and the city is awake. People shout, chase, and close in. He sprints down streets, through alleys, darting between cars, but the footsteps behind him only grow louder. Then the mob catches him. Ordinary citizens, fathers, sons, neighbors, wrestle him to the ground. Fists crash down. He struggles, but panic replaces power. The predator, who once thrived on fear, is now at the mercy of those who refuse to let him slip away again. By the time police arrive, the Night Stalker is bloodied and beaten, held down by the same community he once terrorized. Cuffed and dragged into custody, his reign ends not in shadows, but under the blistering sun, defeated by the courage of ordinary people. And while Ramirez fell to the fury of a crowd, another predator would meet his downfall in a quieter setting. A single home, a single victim, and a knife that suddenly turned against him. Tommy Lynn Sells, Fabienne Witherspoon, Springfield, Illinois, 1992. Fabienne Witherspoon opens the door to a man who looks like he needs help. He says he's down on his luck, that he needs food, maybe some money. His voice is soft, almost pitiful. But behind the words is Tommy Lynn Sells, a drifter, conman, and killer who has left a trail of bodies across America. Fabienne lets him inside. She offers kindness, a gesture she thinks costs nothing. But the moment she turns her back, the mask slips. Sells lunges. He attacks with a knife, driving her into a desperate fight for her life. The kitchen erupts in chaos. He stabs, she claws, and blood smears across the walls. But Fabienne refuses to collapse. In the middle of the struggle, she grabs the knife itself, turns it, and drives the blade into him. Once, twice, again. Shock ripples across his face. The predator is bleeding, staggering, wounded by the prey he thought was helpless. Fabienne is battered, cut, and fighting through waves of pain, but she does not stop. She stabs him again, buying seconds, then minutes, until finally she breaks free and escapes the house. She runs, drenched in blood, his and her own, straight into the arms of neighbors who call police. Tommy Lynn Sells limps away that day, his body torn and bleeding. He will kill again before justice finally catches him, but Fabienne Witherspoon survived. She lived to testify, to stare him down in court, and to remind the world that sometimes the difference between life and death is the will to fight back. And not every survivor escaped their nightmare by drawing blood. One man would find himself trapped in a basement, designed to be a kill room, and the only way out was to outthink the killer who put him there. Mark Andrew Twitchell, Gilles Tetreault, Edmonton, Canada, 2008. Gilles Tétrault thinks he's about to meet a woman he connected with online. The address she's given him isn't a restaurant or even a house. It's a quiet garage tucked away on a suburban street. Odd, but curiosity pushes him forward. The garage door creaks as he steps inside. It smells faintly of oil and concrete. The space is dim, silent. He takes a step, then another. Suddenly, the door slams shut behind him. The lights snap on. In front of him stands not a date, but a man wearing a hockey mask, holding a weapon. Behind him, the walls are lined with plastic sheets. Tools glint under the harsh light. Every detail screams of preparation. This isn't an accident. It's a trap. The masked man lunges. A violent struggle erupts. Shouts, fists, the scrape of metal against concrete. Gilles realizes in a split second, this stranger doesn't just want to hurt him. He wants to kill him. Panic floods his body, but instinct takes over. He fights back with everything he has, shoving, clawing, thrashing against the grip that's dragging him deeper into the garage. The mask slips. For a brief, shocking instant, Gilles sees the face beneath. Mark Andrew Twitchell, a failed filmmaker, obsessed with Dexter, who fantasized about creating his own perfect murder. And Gilles was supposed to be his first victim. But Twitchell hadn't counted on resistance. Gilles twists, breaks free, and bolts for the door. He crashes into the cold Canadian night, stumbling, sprinting, not daring to look back. His lungs burn, his legs ache, but adrenaline keeps him moving until he's far from the nightmare behind him. Twitchell is left in his so-called kill room, surrounded not by triumph, but by failure. Gilles Tétrault survived, and years later his testimony in court would expose Twitchell's delusion of becoming a real-life serial killer. One man's escape ended a fantasy built on plastic sheets and lies. But in Moscow, survival came down to something far simpler. A leash, a dog, and a woman who refused to be another tally on the chessboard killer's list. Alexander Pichushkin, the chessboard killer. Moscow, early 2000s. The sound of footsteps echoes across a park as night falls. A woman walks her dog, the leash wrapped loosely around her hand. It's a quiet routine, something she's done countless times before. But tonight, she isn't alone. From the shadows steps a tall man with sharp eyes and a chilling smile. His name is Alexander Pichushkin, later known as the chessboard killer. His goal is as twisted as it is simple. He wants to kill enough people to fill every square on a chessboard. 64 murders. And tonight, he believes she will be another move in his game. He approaches casually as if by chance and then suddenly attacks. His hands close around her, trying to force her down. The dog barks wildly, teeth snapping, the leash tangling between them. The woman thrashes, panic rising, but instead of freezing, she strikes back. She grips the leash tight and swings it, the dog lunging with her. It's chaos, barking, shouts, the scuffle of bodies in the dark. Pichushkin loses control. For once, his victim isn't silent, isn't submissive. She claws, kicks, yanks herself free. The dog's fury and her determination overwhelm him. And in the struggle, she breaks away, running through the park until the shadows give way to streetlights. She survives. Later, her report to police becomes a vital piece of evidence in exposing Pichushkin's pattern of violence. He isn't caught that night, but the leash she wielded, the resistance she gave, helped bring the chessboard killer into the light. In Moscow, it was a dog's leash that saved a life. But across the ocean in Utah, another woman would fight back inside a moving car, against a man who had already perfected the art of manipulation. Ted Bundy, Carol DaRonch, Murray, Utah, 1974. The mall is buzzing with weekend chatter when a young woman, Carol DaRonch, is approached by a man in a police uniform. He introduces himself as Officer Roseland and tells her there's been an attempted car break-in, her car specifically. Calm, authoritative, he asks her to come with him. Carol hesitates, but he's convincing. After all, who questions a police officer? She follows him out of the mall and into the parking lot. He leads her to a Volkswagen Beetle, his car, not a patrol car. And the moment she steps inside, the illusion begins to crack. The doors lock, the smile fades. The man beside her is not an officer at all. He is Theodore Bundy, Bundy drives, his tone shifting from polite to menacing. He pulls off the road into a quiet area, and before Carol can react, he lunges. A hand clamps onto her wrist. A pair of handcuffs snaps around one arm, metal biting into her skin. He grabs for the other, but Carol thrashes, fighting wildly inside the cramped car. Nails scratch, legs kick, adrenaline surges. She manages to wrench the door open and throw herself into the road. Bundy tries to drag her back, but she twists free and bolts into the street, screaming for help. A passing car slows, startled by the chaos, and Bundy knows it's over, for now. He speeds away into the night, his perfect disguise shattered by the will of one young woman who refused to disappear. Carol Durant survived, and months later she would identify Bundy in court, her testimony becoming one of the key moments in unmasking America's most notorious serial killer. Bundy's deception failed because Carol fought back, and in another city, years later, a different predator's control would unravel, not because of disguise or trickery, but because his victim refused to stay chained in a killer's apartment. Jeffrey Dahmer, Tracy Edwards, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, July 22, 1991. Tracy Edwards is walking through the city when a quiet man approaches him. He offers beer, money, a place to hang out. Something feels off, but Tracy agrees, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of need. He follows the man back to his apartment. Inside, the air feels heavy. The curtains are drawn, the walls lined with strange posters. A foul odor lingers, masked poorly by cheap chemicals. The man introduces himself simply as Jeff. He offers Tracy a drink, but as the minutes pass, Jeff's friendliness unravels. Then, cold steel. A handcuff clicks around Tracy's wrist. Panic flashes through him. He demands to be released, but Jeff only smiles, eyes vacant, voice low. This isn't a game. This is Jeffrey Dahmer, a man who has already killed more than a dozen victims. And Tracy is supposed to be next, but fear doesn't paralyze him, it sharpens him. He studies Dahmer, sensing his strange mix of menace and vulnerability. He talks, he listens, he pretends to go along. At one point, Dahmer presses a knife against his chest. Tracy stays calm even as terror roars inside him. He waits, looks for a chance, and then he moves. With sudden force, he shoves Dahmer back, bolts for the door, and bursts into the hallway with the cuff still hanging from his wrist. He sprints into the street, flags down 2 police officers, and begs them to come with him. Moments later, those same officers step into Dahmer's apartment. What they find shocks the world. Photographs, remains, evidence of horrors no one had imagined. All of it uncovered because one man refused to surrender, because Tracy Edwards broke free and ran for his life. Dahmer's empire of silence ended with a single escape. And just as one victim's resistance toppled him, another killer, this time in Brazil, would discover that even predators can fall when they prey on the wrong kind of enemy. Pedro Rodrigues Filho, Pedrinho Matador. Brazil, 1970s. Pedro Rodrigues Filho grew up in violence and quickly became defined by it. As a teenager, he carried out his first murder before the age of 15, shooting a school official he believed had fired his father. From that moment on, Pedro's path was set. He became known as Pedrinho Matador, Killer Petey. Unlike most serial killers, he claimed a twisted sense of purpose. He killed criminals, drug dealers, gang members, even other murderers. He styled himself as a vigilante, a man cleaning up Brazil's underworld with blood and steel. To some, he was a brutal avenger. To others, nothing more than a ruthless killer hiding behind excuses. And for years, no one dared to challenge him. Pedro carried knives, guns, and sometimes nothing more than his bare hands. He walked into gang territory as if he owned it, pulled the trigger without hesitation, and bragged openly about the dozens of lives he had taken. He claimed his body count soared past 70. In prison, surrounded by the very criminals he hated, he killed even more. He thrived in the chaos, smiling for cameras, grinning as he spoke of murder as if it was sport. But arrogance has a way of blinding even the most feared predator. One day, Pedro picked a target like so many before, a criminal he thought would crumble beneath his fury. But this time, the man didn't collapse. he fought back. The struggle was fierce, a clash of two predators. Pedro lunged with confidence, but his opponent countered with strength Pedro hadn't expected. The fight turned, blows raining down on the vigilante who had so often walked away victorious. For the first time, Pedrinho Matador was the one on the ground, pinned, powerless. That moment marked the end of his self-styled reign of justice. Not a police sting, not a grand takedown, just a brutal reminder that even killers can bleed, and that one mistake, one wrong choice of victim, can end the illusion of invincibility. Pedro Rodrigues Filho was captured, dragged into Brazil's prison system, where his legend became something else entirely. A story of pride, violence, and the downfall of a man who believed he could kill forever without consequence. And while Filho's downfall came at the hands of another criminal, thousands of miles away in Africa, a killer known as the Lusaka Strangler would learn the same lesson. When a woman he thought was helpless fought back and turned his secrets into headlines. Milton Sipilo, the Lusaka Strangler. Lusaka, Zambia. Late 1980s. For months, the capital city lived in fear. Women vanished only to be found later, strangled. Whispers spread of a predator who stalked bus stops, train stations, lonely roads. He was nameless, faceless, known only as the Lusaka Strangler, and each week, another life was taken. The man behind the terror was Milton Sipalo, a soldier who blended into the everyday fabric of the city. He wore a uniform. He moved with authority. No one suspected him, until one night he chose a victim who refused to be silent. He approached her as he had so many others, with confidence. He lured her aside, tried to overpower her, but instead of yielding, she fought back. She clawed, screamed, and resisted with every ounce of strength. The attack spilled into the open. People gathered, whispers turned into shouts, and suddenly the hunter was exposed in the very streets he had once haunted. The woman lived, and her bravery cracked the silence. For the first time, the Lusaka Strangler had a face, a name, and witnesses. Within days, Sipilo's crimes were no longer secrets whispered in fear. They were headlines. Milton Sipilo had ruled Lusaka with shadows and silence, but one wrong choice, one woman's refusal to die quietly, dragged him into the light and ended his reign of terror. And he wasn't alone. In America, another predator thought he could keep killing in the dark. But when one victim fought him off and left behind a crucial trace, his downfall became inevitable. Artemio Sanchez, the bike path killer. Buffalo, New York. For decades, women feared the city's quiet bike paths. Joggers, cyclists, and walkers disappeared or were found assaulted, murdered. Whispers of a predator grew louder, but year after year, the man responsible stayed in the shadows. He became known as the bike path killer. Artemio Sanchez lived a double life. By day, he was a husband, a father, a man with a steady job. By night, he stalked women in isolated places, attacking them with chilling precision. Police had no face, no name, only a pattern that stretched across years. But then, one victim changed everything. She fought back with everything she had. She screamed, scratched, clawed at him, and though she suffered, she survived. In the struggle, she left behind something Sanchez couldn't erase: his DNA. At first, it meant little. Technology wasn't yet ready to use it fully, but as years passed and forensic science advanced, the trace she left became a weapon more powerful than fists or knives. Detectives linked the DNA across multiple crime scenes, unraveling the web Sanchez thought he had woven too tightly to break. When he was finally arrested in 2007, investigators knew the truth. His downfall didn't begin with police work or confessions. It began with a woman who refused to go quietly, who fought long enough to leave behind the evidence that would eventually expose him. Sanchez's mask of normalcy was torn away by a single act of resistance. And in California, another predator, the trailside killer, would face a similar fate when one of his intended victims survived, lived, and stood in court to name him. David Carpenter, the trailside killer. California, late 1970s and 80s. The hiking trails of Marin County, Santa Cruz, and San Francisco should have been places of peace, sunlight breaking through trees, the sound of footsteps on dirt paths, the rush of wind through the hills. But for years, those trails carried a shadow. Women were vanishing. Bodies were discovered. A predator was lurking where people felt safest. His name was David Carpenter, the trailside killer. With thick glasses, a quiet demeanor, and a stutter, he looked anything but threatening. But behind the disguise was a man who stalked women in isolation, ambushing them on secluded trails. His crimes shocked California, and fear spread across its most beautiful landscapes. Carpenter believed his victims were powerless, trapped by the wilderness he used as his hunting ground. But one day, his calculation failed. He attacked a woman, believing she would fall like so many before her. Instead, she fought back with everything she had. She resisted his chokehold, struggled fiercely, and survived. Bruised and terrified but alive, she later sat in a courtroom and pointed directly at him. Her testimony cut through the disguise Carpenter had hidden behind for years. She gave investigators the identification they needed: the voice, the face, the man. Carpenter's reign didn't end because of some elaborate sting or mistake in planning. It ended because one woman refused to disappear, refused to let him erase her story. She carried her scars into the light, and with them, shattered the illusion of the trailside killer. But California wasn't done with predators yet. Not far away, another man stalked women in Riverside, until one victim fought back so fiercely that she not only survived, but later helped send the Riverside killer to prison. William Suff, the Riverside killer. Riverside County, California, early 1990s. The streets were quiet, but the fear was loud. For years, women, mostly sex workers, were disappearing, their bodies later found dumped in rural areas. Investigators pieced together a pattern: strangulation, brutal assaults, and eerie familiarity with the county roads. The man behind the killings lived a double life. By day, William Suff worked as a government employee, a seemingly ordinary face in the crowd. By night, he stalked the streets, picking up women and leaving them for dead. His cruelty earned him the name the Riverside Killer. But like so many predators before him, Suff eventually chose a victim who refused to die. One night, he tried to overpower a woman he thought would be easy prey. But she resisted with everything in her body, scratching, clawing, screaming, fighting to stay alive. Suff attacked viciously, but she refused to stop. Against the odds, she survived the encounter. Her escape changed everything. In the aftermath, she carried more than scars. She carried the truth. She told investigators what happened, described the man who attacked her, and later testified in court. Her survival carved a crack in Suff's mask of normalcy, a crack that investigators widened until his crimes stood exposed. William Suff believed he could keep killing in the shadows, that his victims would vanish without voices. Instead, one woman's voice became the key to his downfall. And while her testimony unmasked the Riverside Killer, another woman in Los Angeles would survive a shotgun blast, crawl her way back from death itself, and bring down the Grim Sleeper, Lonnie Franklin Jr. The Grim Sleeper, Los Angeles, 1988. It's late evening when Enietra Washington accepts a ride from a man who seems trustworthy. He talks easily, even kindly, the way someone might who's trying to put a stranger at ease. She doesn't know she's sitting beside Lonnie Franklin Jr., a man who has already begun a series of murders that will later earn him the name the Grim Sleeper. The car winds through the city, but the tone inside shifts. Franklin pulls out a gun, levels it at her chest, and without hesitation, fires. The shotgun blast tears through her body. The sound is deafening. Her chest erupts in searing pain, and her world collapses into darkness. Franklin believes she is dead. He shoves her from the car, leaving her bleeding in the street like so many of his forgotten victims. But Enietra doesn't die. Somehow, through the shock and agony, she moves. Every step is a war. Her hands press against her wound, her breaths come in gasps, but she pushes forward. She stumbles through the night until she reaches a house where strangers rush to her side and call for help. Against all odds, she survives the shooting. For years, Enietra carried that night with her, a scar, a memory, and a story no one else could tell. And when detectives finally unraveled Franklin's trail of killings, her survival became the linchpin. She sat in court, looked the grim sleeper in the eye, and identified him as the man who had left her for dead. Her words destroyed his anonymity, tying him to the crimes he had hidden for decades. Franklin believed his victims would vanish without a voice, but Enietra's voice, shaking, scarred, but unbroken, brought him down. And just as her survival marked the end of the grim sleeper's illusion of invincibility, another killer in Seattle, the Green River Killer, would see his perfect pattern crumble when a woman fought her way out of his grip and lived to expose him. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Seattle, Washington, early 1980s. The Green River winds quietly through King County, but beneath its surface, terror was growing. Bodies were being pulled from its waters. Young women, many of them sex workers, discarded like trash. Investigators knew they were chasing a predator, but no one yet understood the scale of his crimes. That predator was Gary Ridgway. He seemed ordinary, a truck painter, a man with neighbors and co-workers who saw nothing sinister in him. But by night, he prowled highways and city streets, luring women into his truck, driving them to isolated areas, and strangling them. He became known as the Green River Killer, and over time, he would confess to killing 71 women, making him one of the deadliest serial killers in American history. But even Ridgway wasn't untouchable. One night, he picked up a young woman named Rebecca Gard. She stepped into his truck, unaware she was sitting beside a man who had already left countless bodies in shallow graves. The drive was calm until it wasn't. Ridgway attacked suddenly, his hands closing around her throat. He squeezed, confident, certain this would end like all the others. But Rebecca fought. She thrashed, clawed, kicked with everything she had. Airless, terrified, she pushed against his grip until, in a split second of desperation, she broke free. She scrambled from the truck and ran into the night, heart pounding, lungs burning, alive. Rebecca carried that night with her for years, and when investigators closed in on Ridgway decades later, she stepped into the courtroom and told her story. She pointed to the man who had tried to kill her, her survival testimony hammering another nail into his fate. Gary Ridgway's crimes stretched farther than anyone could imagine, but his mask of invisibility cracked the moment a victim lived. Rebecca Gard's resistance proved that even the most prolific killer in America's history could be unmasked by one voice refusing to stay silent. And she wasn't alone. In New England, another woman would face a faceless attacker on a lonely road, stabbed again and again while pregnant, and still refused to die. Her survival would leave a killer's identity shrouded in mystery, but her story would echo louder than his silence. Jane Borowski, the Connecticut River Valley Killer, Swansea, New Hampshire, 1988. It's a warm summer night when Jane Borowski, 7 months pregnant, pulls into a convenience store parking lot to grab a soda. She doesn't notice the man watching her. A stranger, silent, patient. As she sits back in her car, the man approaches and taps on the window. He asks about the payphone. His voice is calm, almost casual. Jane points toward it. Then, without warning, the man opens her door, and everything changes. A knife flashes in the dark. He lunges, stabbing her again and again. Jane's screams rip into the night air as the blade slashes her chest, her arms, her back. 27 wounds in total. The man believes she's finished, a pregnant woman bleeding, crumpled on the seat. To him, she's another victim for the growing tally of the Connecticut River Valley Killer, a predator linked to a string of unsolved murders across New England. But Jane refuses to die. Even as blood soaks her clothes, even as pain blurs her vision, she fights. She claws at the door handle, shoves the man away, and drives off into the night, one hand gripping the wheel, the other pressing against her wounds. She drives miles, headlights cutting through the darkness, until she finally finds help. Jane survives the attack. Her baby survives too, and though her attacker has never been definitively identified, her testimony remains the most chilling account tied to the Connecticut River Valley murders. She carried not just her own survival, but proof that even a faceless predator could not silence every voice. Her story is one of raw endurance, 27 stab wounds, and still she lived. And as haunting as her survival was, another woman, far from New England, would escape her own nightmare by turning her mind into her sharpest weapon. A teenager abducted by a notorious killer who would resist, manipulate, and outsmart him until he had no choice but to let her go. Bobby Jo Long, Lisa McVeigh, Tampa, Florida. November 1984. 17-year-old Lisa McVeigh finishes her late-night shift at a donut shop. The streets are quiet, the kind of silence that feels safe until it isn't. As she bikes home, a car pulls up behind her. Before she can react, a man leaps out, grabs her and forces her inside. Her abductor is Bobby Jo Long, a predator who has already murdered multiple women across Florida. For Lisa, the nightmare begins the moment the door slams shut. Long drives her to his apartment. Inside, he binds her, blinds her, and assaults her repeatedly. For 26 hours, Lisa lives in constant terror, convinced each moment will be her last. But beneath the fear, her mind sharpens. She studies him. The sound of his voice, the feel of the room, the layout of his apartment. She takes in every detail. If she survives, these details could save countless others. And then she does something extraordinary. She talks to him. She humanizes herself. She tells him about her struggles, her pain, even hints at thoughts of suicide, carefully choosing words to shift his perception. She becomes less of a victim, more of a person in his eyes. It's manipulation, born from sheer survival instinct. Her gamble works. After more than a full day in captivity, Bobby Jo Long drives Lisa back out onto the streets. He stops the car, shoves her out, and speeds away, leaving behind the one victim he thought he controlled. But Lisa doesn't just survive. She runs straight to police. She describes his car, his apartment, his habits, every detail she memorized in those 26 hours. Within 2 weeks, Bobby Jo Long is arrested. Her testimony and courage help end his killing spree, saving untold lives. Lisa McVeigh's story is more than survival, it's victory. She turned her terror into strategy, her fear into strength. She transformed captivity into evidence and used it to take down a killer. Killers plan for silence. They plan for fear, for control, for lives cut short. What they never plan for is survival. Because survival talks. It remembers. It testifies. It turns victims into witnesses and witnesses into the very reason predators fall. These survivors didn't just escape, they flipped the ending. And as long as their voices are heard, no killer ever truly gets the last word.